Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I want to tell you about the first time I went backpacking. I was 10, and I was in summer camp, and we took 3 days off-site to hike through the redwoods. And every child was given a hiking backpack, and all of the frames were the same size, and our counselors put about the same weight in each pack. But I've always been a petite person. So you have to imagine that a pack that was manageable for the other 10-year-olds towered over me. And as we began walking through the woods, my pack got heavier and heavier, and it was really starting to hurt. And as it started to hurt, I started to walk faster and faster, as if I could outrun this difficulty. And I could hear my counselor behind me saying, "Stop, slow down, where are you going?" And she finally caught up with me when I tripped, and she sat with me and she talked to me about what's going on. And she explained to me that sometimes when we're in pain, perhaps the best policy is not to just keep barreling down the path as if everything's fine. And she said, "We're going to sit in stillness for a little while. We're going to rest. I can't really help you lighten your pack because everyone's carrying a burden, but let's sit and rest and see if that helps." Now this week, we get to see the reaction of two brothers who are in pain, Moses and Aaron. And they have very different reactions. One wants to barrel down the path as if nothing has happened, and the other wants to stay in stillness for a while. When we open up the Parsha, they are celebrating completing the building of the Mishkan, the tent of meeting. And the people have worked really hard at this, and they've dedicated all of their treasure into this. And this is supposed to be what works. This is going to be the solution that gets them through the challenges of the wilderness. This is how they're supposed to connect to God. And everything starts out great. The very first sacrifice is offered by Aaron, the high priest, and we're told that God appears before the people and they feel God's presence. But then, something goes terribly wrong. We don't know why, but for some reason, Nadav and Avihu make an offering, and they're consumed in fire. And you have to understand, this is not just a personal tragedy for the family, but this is a national tragedy, and it calls into doubt all sorts of things. Should they follow this God into the wilderness? Do Moses and Aaron really know what they're doing? So everyone's upset, and they're anxious, and they're panicking. And Moses, the leader, steps forward and says, "All right, you and your remaining sons, Aaron, do not show a sign of grief." Right? He says, "Don't dishevel your hair. And don't come out of the tent of meeting." Right? You stay there and you pretend like everything's fine. The show must go on. We cannot panic the people. And a little while later, Itamar and Eleazar, the brothers of those who died, are berated by Moses because they gave a sin offering and they burned it up completely instead of saving a portion and eating it. And Moses goes nuts and he says, "I can't believe that you would do that." Now what about Aaron? He has a very different reaction than Moses. Moses is sort of like, well, we celebrated or commemorated the anniversary of the Titanic this week, and there are stories about the orchestra of the Titanic playing as the ship is sinking. So on the one hand, you could say, well, that's ridiculous. That doesn't really help anybody. They should have gotten in lifeboats or tried to help others get into lifeboats. But there is a kind of stoicism about the fact that the orchestra continued to play and pretend as if it was business as usual. It was a way of giving other people strength. Aaron has a completely different reaction than that. His first reaction is vayidom, which means he was quiet, but it also means he was still. He took time to not continue as if everything was fine. And later, when his brother Moshe is berating his two sons for not consuming the sacrifice, he stands up and he says to his brother, "I'm not sure God would find it acceptable for us to eat a sacrifice in this state." And Moshe backs down and says, "You're probably right." This week, we will also mark the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing on Sunday. And I was listening to NPR, one of the stories of the survivors. And after she got out of the hospital, she spent a few days with a physician who was a friend because he helped her with her wounds, but then she needed to withdraw from the world. She needed to find stillness, and she says that she went to a monastery, and she spent most of her time sleeping. She pulled herself out of the daily routine. She did not continue as if everything were fine. You see, they had a real dilemma on their hands because now they have this sin offering to eat, and everyone's very anxious because clearly when things go wrong in the tabernacle, they really go wrong. And Moses' reaction is, well, we should do more and more. And Aaron's reaction is, no, we should pull back. And ultimately, what does this have to do with us in 2015? I think when human beings suffer catastrophe, we are pretty good at slowing down, right? In Judaism, I mentioned earlier, we have this ritual of sitting Shiva for a week, of not re-entering our normal life right after the death of a loved one. But in our regular lives, we have these microcosms of catastrophes. We have these little things that happen to us, these disappointments or pains that can eat away at us. It could be doing poorly on an exam. It could be not getting that promotion that you wanted. And a lot of us have a tendency to keep moving forward, to not acknowledge the little griefs that we're experiencing. And then suddenly we find ourselves losing our temper at the strangest time or bursting into tears inappropriately because we haven't taken time to be still and to appreciate the fact that we are feeling hurt. We haven't taken the time to reach out to someone for a friendly ear or to take a walk around the block, taking deep breaths. We're so eager to barrel down the path. So this little girl backpacking in the woods, what happened to her? We sat for a good 20 minutes. Everyone else decided it was a good idea too. We all sat in the shade, we all had a snack. And when we got back up, the pain from the backpack was lessened, and I was able to continue on the path. And I think what made it even more restful than actually stopping was that my counselor was looking out for me, and so were the other children. And we continued on together, but only when we were ready. Shabbat Shalom.